Just a hair bit late, but we did pass the budget, so this is a great thing for this evening. Call to order, roll call. All present, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Identify possible conflicts of interest. Seeing none, move on to item D, and I apologize, I did not pick up the orange sheet, and there is, okay, thank you. Public comment period correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. And you have 5 minutes, and please state your name and your address. Rachel, thank you.
Oh, sorry. My name is Rachel Mysick. I live at 306 East 5th Street, Marshfield, Wisconsin. I'm here to talk about Marshfield Transit, and I think some of my comments may have already been addressed, but I just would like to reiterate them. There's few jobs in the world where one can say they earn a paycheck and also be in service to their community. And we have gentlemen here that understand that quite well, and I know you understand that quite well. There's a very special feeling you feel when you are helping someone that you know may not have been able to help themselves. And as individuals we serve, they range from citizens going to work to quality of life activities, YMCA, Citizen Center, the church. And then we do have people that we have to take to and from the clinic. The clinic is one of our top destinations and urgent care. Some of these people would not get where they need to go without Marshfield Transit. We service wheelchairs, we service people in walkers, we service people with mental health issues. It's a kaleidoscope of stuff that the drivers have to interface with. And some days it's very fulfilling, and some days it's emotionally difficult. What I am most concerned about with Marshfield Transit is our ability to retain and recruit drivers. Sadly, one of our drivers is up in the hospital right now, and another one of our drivers left because he just could not make it on the wages we're paid. I would like to see the city of Marshfield possibly conduct a study or a survey, I'm not sure what the technical word is called, on wage comparison in other cities for Marshfield Transit. Because you have a very incredible team at the cab company doing everything they can do, and just at the end of the day feeling worn out that their bills are piling up in some aspects. And I just want to thank Marshfield, the city of Marshfield, for continuing to provide a service for people that are marginal and left behind. I really enjoy picking up some of these passengers. Some of them are quite humorous and funny. And I really want to thank the citizens of Marshfield as well, because it's their taxpayer money that help fund the transit center. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. Anyone else to come before the body? Second time. Number 3, and thank you again. Item number E, approval of minutes from November 14th, regular meeting of 2023, November 14th, joint with Marshfield Utilities Commission, November 21st, of course, 2023, joint with Marshfield Utilities Commission, and lastly, November 21st, 2023, budget meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, a second by Alderman Weigel. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes, all ayes. Thank you very much. And any staff updates?
I'm not aware of any this evening.
Okay, thank you. And mayor's comments. I saw my doctor this morning, and as I am on the road to recovery from a successful surgery, I am back doing some of my mayor duties, and I will continue to move forward. I thank you all for your support, and that is my report. H, Common Council. Any comments from the council members this evening? Seeing none, city administrators update.
Just a couple things. Got word that it's good news. You know, you've been supportive as a council of the efforts to get our certified sites designation with the state. Remember, we got the 120 acres from UW, and we've been trying to get to that shovel-ready place where the state will have us on that list through WEDAC. That developers, site selectors know that we are ready to go here in Marshfield. Well, we are at the point now of submitting a fully completed application. We feel good about the likelihood of that getting approved, and that will be a big step in terms of getting us going on marketing that land and being able to attract business to the 120 acres. The other thing I want to note, again, as council, you got a note from me before about a special presentation that's going to occur here in this building, in this room, on Thursday, December 7th at 6 p.m. John Spiros, representative from this area, is going to be presenting an award to police officer Terry Endries for his great effort. I think we talked about this before, what he did, and it's very, very worthy of recognition. So 6 p.m. on Thursday, December 7th, for those of you who can make it here for that recognition. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Administrator Barg. Item J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, on to item K, consent agenda. Motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Spiros. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passes. We can skip number L and go on to number M, presentation. Primary report on compensation market update, introduced by Sarah Dreschel, Human Resources Director, presented by Elena Mass-McGrath. And Elena is on the screen. Welcome, Elena. And Sarah.
Good evening. How are you today?
They're both online.
Yeah, they're both on. I just saw that now. I apologize.
Sarah, maybe give just a brief update of how we got here, and then Milena, take it away.
Sure. So thank you, everyone, for the time tonight to discuss the compensation market update. Milena is with us from McGrath. She's been working very hard to kind of get us up to speed on where we're at compensation-wise. She's going to do, obviously, this presentation here tonight and then answer any questions. So I will hand it over to her. Thanks, Milena, for being here.
You're very welcome, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for letting me do this remote. I actually had intended to be at your meeting 2 weeks ago, but I had a conflict with my schedule, and today the only option that I had was remote possibility. So I'm not able to see everyone in the audience, so I think what I'll do is just get through my presentation, and then I will take questions at the end if that's okay with everybody. So what I'd like to do here this evening is just do an overview of what we have done up to this point in the project, and then I'll let you know what the rest of our endeavor is going to look like. We're going to cover the summary of what our market findings were. And I also want to share with you what my findings are when I look internally at your employee demographics and what that means for you in terms of future recruitment and how maybe some potential retention concerns. We're also going to do a little road in history, just because not everybody that is on the council was there back in 2018 when we started your new compensation plan, and that really is impacting what my recommendations are going to be for you going forward. We're going to talk through what my options are, and at this point, what my recommendation is for the city. We are not done. We are very close to being done, and I think that the city will be looking forward to having everything in their hands, just so that there could be the start of the future discussions that you're going to need to have in terms of the finances for this particular outcome. To date, what we have done is met with all of your department directors, and I've also met with administration and human resources. The directors also, in some cases, they brought their managers in, and what we talked through was, has anything changed significantly since 2018 in your positions? Because we certainly want to know if there's something that we haven't captured over the last couple of years. And then also talking through, are you having any challenges with recruitment or retention, any specific positions, and does the model that you're working under, is it working for your respective department? I also extended the invitation to meet with each of the council members individually so we could talk through compensation, your individual concerns that you might have as we walk through this project, because I knew at the time that there was going to be certainly a concern of the finances and maybe some higher philosophical questions. And so I appreciate everybody who took the time to meet with me on those. And that is really going to be an important discussion point here this evening as we go into the final stages of this project. We reviewed all of your information. We have asked for some employees to complete a position questionnaire just to really gain an understanding of mostly your administrative personnel. Sometimes what we're finding in the market is that there is a need for less levels because organizations aren't necessarily relying on as much administrative staff. And so the responsibilities of that elevate up. And as a result, we can get rid of a level. I'm still looking at that. That's one of the last few items that I have to finish before I can talk meaningfully with your administration about my final recommendations. And then we did go out to the market and we solicited market data. Now, we collected both public and private data. I know that was a level of concern. I'm only going to be sharing with you on the screen here this evening what the public data looks like. The private data ends up being a little bit more challenging because we only get those minimums. I can't speak on what those minimums did show because they actually were pretty substantial, and that's probably not necessarily surprising to most of you in the room that what's happened in the private sector certainly has taken off. Excuse me. This is the listing of the public comparables. Just to give you a reminder, when we started this project in the late summer, the comparables listing was brought back to the Common Council so that you could approve that, and you did. And so these are the organizations that we solicited the market data from. And so when I talk about you as the city of Marshfield in comparison to your market, who you see here on the screen is who I am talking about. All right, so let's dive into the market analysis of what our findings are, because there are actually really some interesting outcomes. When we do this, what we do is instead of giving you all of this raw data, we analyze it and we put it into some much more distinct numbers that are more meaningful to the organization. And we put it into what's called a comp ratio. That is a comparison ratio between the city of Marshfield against that analyzed average of all of those other organizations. And we put it into a percentage form. That percentage form, then, we like to see that number be as close to 50 as possible. 50% means that you are, as an organization, on average paying the same as the average to that market. That means then that there are going to be some communities that pay more. There's going to be some communities that pay less. But we also want to pay attention to any outliers. So if there's any that are over about 60%, why is it that the market data just isn't necessarily aligned to what's happening internally into your organization? But we're really paying more attention to the low end of this, and because the low end comp ratio would indicate that your salary range is not market competitive, and we're going to want to pay particularly close attention to that when I'm going through my tables with you. Now, there's always this element of, with the salary range, a general acceptance in public sector that you have a range. And so because of that, In previous years, we would always go plus minus 10%. But what's happening right now in the labor market is that positions that have a comp ratio of a low 40 to 44%, they technically would be market competitive. However, the reality is that if we were to poll your HR department or your hiring departments, they will tell you that that rate is not market competitive. Part of the reason is because the ranges that are occurring within the public sector may not necessarily be climbing quite as fast, or they're not necessarily moving the needle on the minimum as much as they're maybe moving the rest of their salary ranges. So bottom line, even though the 40 to 44% in theory would be considered market competitive, the reality is that it no longer is. And because of that, then I have color-coded those a little bit differently for you so that you can see exactly what's going on. So this is what your comp ratios look like at the minimum of your salary schedule. So this is step one to the rest of the market. And when you look at it and at first glance, it doesn't look too terribly bad. It's showing that 16% of the positions that we were able to benchmark are too far below in order to be market competitive. And generally speaking, I would say that's a really good number. However, what is most concerning here is the 33% that have the comp ratio between 40 and 44%. And one of the things that I do want to urge caution on is this is just what we are seeing in the public sector. This does not consider what we found in the private sector. In the private sector, I will say just by sheer dollars, the private sector is beating you by upwards of $6,000 to $10,000 per position, and that when you equate that to a percentage, it's a real significant number. So overall, what we are finding is that about half of your positions at step one are doing okay. Now, one of the other challenges that you have is that not every organization is hiring at the minimum. So even though you might be aligned at about half of your positions, the reality is that more and more organizations are having to hire further up into the range because employees are demanding those higher ranges. And sometimes you just need to pay a little bit more in order to get the candidate of choice. One of the things that has helped you is your current salary structure, because if you recall, you have a 15-step model, and we put your market point at step 5. That's going to become an important conversation piece here a little bit later because it's helped you at the front end, but there are some inherent issues that we're seeing at the tail end of your salary schedule that we'll have some recommendations on. So the next thing we look at then is your midpoint. And your midpoint then is showing probably what I'm not surprised to see this because this really is where I say rubber hits the road. And this is where we align you to the market. And so where are you aligning to that average market with those other organizations? What we have found is that 31% of your positions clearly under the market, but you now have about 36% of those positions that technically we would say that they could be market competitive, but the reality is that they are not. And so when you look at that, we've broken you down into a third, and it looks like more like only about a third of your positions are market competitive by the time they get to step 5 in the model. And that might be part of the problem with your retention. If individuals beyond step 5 are going to start slowing down and they're going to have smaller incremental increases, they are going to be looking for other opportunities that are going to pay them more competitively. The last one that I'm going to talk about here before I move on to your demographics then is what your individual incumbents are looking like. And so what we did was we took an average of your position's actual wages. And when I say an average of wages, I will say your equipment operator 2 is we took all of them and we averaged that rate of pay, and then we looked at that comparatively against the rest of the market and what their counterparts are earning in other organizations. So this is not individual people, but this is by position. So what we're seeing here is, interestingly enough, is that about half of your positions, they are further along in your salary ranges. And so for when I look at that, I say, okay, that's a good thing, because that means that in all likelihood, you've got employees that are poised a little bit further along in their salary schedule, so that when we give the recommendations for the range changes, they may not necessarily experience a significant range or wage change. But that's yet to be seen once we build the costing. But the majority of, or not the majority, the other half of your individual positions, they are struggling when you look at those, what those incumbents are earning. So now that's what the market was. Now I want to just take a quick minute and show you what your employee demographics are, because the market is not always the full story here. And so what we've done is we've taken all of your employees and we have banded them by age and by years of service with the city. And the top, what's happening here on the top is this is all of your age bands and the percentage of your employees, non-union here, and where they are at. Now, interestingly enough, your overall years of service with the organization is actually at about 10 years. You're breaking, or you are achieving an above average tenure in the organization. And so we find that to be very positive. But we've done a little bit of a deeper dive with that. And what we're seeing here is that you have individuals who are age 50 and above who have these very, very high service levels with you. And so what's going to happen is, as these individuals start to retire out, then if you can't retain, these other individuals, then your tenure is going to go down. And what you have here is about 28% of your workforce that they're going to be eligible to retire out. So it's not a bad number. It's not a good number either. But these individuals, they deserve to be able to retire when they want to. But the question is always asked of me: does the city need to worry about retention of their personnel, or do they need to worry about the recruitment of your personnel? Well, you're going to lose 28% of your workforce in all likelihood sometime over the next decade. And so for that, I say you're going to really need to focus on the recruitment aspects, which is the beginning part of your salary schedule. But then we have to do a little bit deeper dive of what else is going on here. And what you see here is that when you look at cross-generation, you have approximately 31% of your workforce that is under the age of 40. That's your very mobile workplace. And they are motivated by money, and they are motivated by having purpose. And if they don't feel one or both of those, they are not afraid to go work elsewhere. And that's why you see a lot of them that are job hopping. And so because that is about a third of your workforce at this point, then I say you really do need to focus on your retention, because you don't want to lose those individuals either. And then the last thing that you have going on, and this is really kind of an interesting little nugget of information, is that in your workforce here, really just they're kind of smack dab in the middle, and these are your 40-somethings. And I'm going to paint this with a real broad brush, but these individuals, chances are not necessarily new into their area of industry, and they are the individuals that you worry are going to get poached. And I know that that has happened in the city of Marshfield, where individuals have been solicited for positions and they weren't necessarily looking, and that's because they do have a very specific skill set, and it's one that a lot of people are willing to pay for. That is also a group of employees that you're going to want to really try to hold on to, because what's happening on the left-hand side here is this is the future of your organization. And so because of that, I took a little bit deeper dive into the time that your individual employees have actually been in their position. And this is how it's looking for you. Right now, well, just over a third of your workforce has been in their position for less than 2 years. Only 20% of your employees have been in their role for 10. And so, when you look at that, you are a little bit of a newer workforce, not necessarily in years of service with the city of Marshfield, but in terms of the role that they're playing, because you have, tried to promote up, or people have moved around into different positions. And so for that, this is your succession planning into the organization, and you want to hold on to those individuals. This is a retention issue. And if your employees don't see the value in taking higher positions or different positions, then what's going to happen is the organization is going to be looking to the outside. And then for that reason, then you're going to want to make sure that your recruitment, that you are focusing on that. And so, this conversation, it flows back and forth. So the question, if someone were to ask me, does the city of Marshfield need to worry about recruitment, or do you need to worry about retention? The answer to you is you need to be worried about both. You need to be focusing on what the front end of the model is looking like, and you need to be focused on what the back end of the model is looking like, because you have to service both areas of your organization. Now, just a little quick history of the salary schedule, and this is important because it's going to go into what our options and our recommendations are. We implemented the structure that you have back in 2018, so it's about 5 years old, and it's certainly time to take a look at, is it really still meeting its needs? Generally speaking, your departments feel that it's working. They certainly are feeling the struggle because the city has not been able to put the COLA onto the salary schedule each year. And so it's not terribly surprising of the results that we found to the external market. When we built your model, we really front-loaded it with those 2.5% steps 1 through 5. But because historically, before the new model, the city had an open range beyond step 5, and it was an area that just wasn't used. Employees were not able to progress through it. And so what we did here was we gave you new steps, and that was pretty significant to the organization. And at the time, we weren't as concerned about retaining your individuals, or the market has certainly changed with that. And so we said, once you get above market, which is step 5, then you can start to slow down those wage increases. And what's happened now is that model is not necessarily going to serve you as well, because employees are seeing those small 1.5% or 2% salary adjustments, and they're saying, given what's going around me in the world, it's not enough anymore. And so for that, then we're going to want to look at, if we're going to make a structure change, that's probably where we want to focus it. So you are facing really very much the perfect storm, because the market conditions have changed pretty substantially. And it's not uncommon, I'm going to put this number out here, it's not uncommon for organizations that have not been able to maintain a regular cost of living for me to be telling you that you're going to be moving your ranges 15 to 18%. That's a sizable number simply because of what's happening economically at this point. You also have specific industries that have changed, some more than others. And I will tell you, this should be no surprise to anybody listening in, your Public Works Department has significantly changed, and those positions are going to have some pretty sizable shifts in order to realign you back to your market. The small adjustments that you have been able to provide to your employees, they just simply aren't enough. And I hate saying that, but given everything, the totality of the situation, the small adjustments probably are not going to work for you long term into the future. So what does that mean for you? But I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this slide in just a moment, if you don't mind. Here's where we're at. I have costed out. I haven't costed out. I'm sorry. I've worked through a couple of different iterations for the city. And the first option that we have is to adjust your existing structure by 10%. And if we do that, then that's going to put you much more in line with what we're finding in the market. It still doesn't answer, or it doesn't really satisfy your retention issues or potential issues that you have coming down the road beyond step 5. So the good news is that I don't have to tell you that your structure needs to be moving by 15 to 18%. It is going to need to move by upwards of 10%. One of the messages that I need to make sure that everyone hears is that that does not necessarily mean that the employees are going to be adjusted by 10%. It means that the salary ranges are going to move. It will inherently cause an in-range compression issue if the employees are not able to move the same percentage, but that's all part of the conversations of implementation and cost and how many budget cycles does the city need in order to accomplish that. So I want to just put that right out there. So the other options that I worked through then are, all right, what do we need to do in order to get the backside of your salary schedule a little bit more robust? And so what I did was I adjusted all of those steps and I increased them from 1.5% to 2%. By me doing that and not necessarily creating a larger range for you, I was able to do that in a total of 14 steps. So everyone goes 2.5% to step 5, and then they go down to 2% thereafter. There are some inherent, perceptions that are with that, and that not all of the salary increases are going to be equitable. And that is something that has occurred over the last couple of years, is equity in salary ranges. And so we're finding that most of those graduatingly decreasing models are starting to go by the wayside for that reason. And so the last model that I did then was making your step structure consistent across the board with 2.5% salary adjustment. And that, with that, then would move your model from a 15 step down to a 12 step. The value of doing that is that it's going to help with your retention. And when I say that, I understand that there may be years that the city is not going to be able to do a significant COLA that is even going to necessarily match the external market indicators. We hope that that is the exception, not the rule, because there are two different elements to maintaining your compensation, and one is by that market cost of living adjustment, and the second one is by the incremental step that the employee experiences each year. But we know that that may not happen every year, and if that can't happen, then the employees will still experience a 2.5% step increase, which is certainly going to go a long way towards your retention. It also is going to help with the feeling of equity that is going on within the organization. There was a discussion early on about whether or not the city should consider a range model, because the range is open and there is great flexibility that comes with the city and how much percentage adjustment the employees are going to receive on an annual basis. My recommendation at this point is to maintain a structured step model for the city. And, we certainly can be looking at some other opportunities for performance to reward employees. It doesn't necessarily have to be through the range. But the other part of this is to make sure that the employees still are able to experience some incremental adjustment through that salary range so that you are able to, retain your personnel. And so for that reason, I feel that it will be best to retain a step model. And my recommendation at this point is going to be 12 steps and adjusting those steps after step 5. The last thing to talk about, and I'm sorry that my slides are a little bit out of order here, is the compensation philosophy. And that was actually a conversation or a question that I talked with each of the council members about when I met with you earlier this summer of, all right, on a philosophical basis, how do you or where do you think that the city should be falling in terms of the market? And I will say overwhelmingly that the individuals that I talked to, they certainly want to make sure that they are compensating their employees competitively to the market. Can that be above market? They really weren't sure. They certainly don't want to be anything less than that average market. And I agree with that, because when you have a compensation philosophy that is less than average, then you tend to still pay out those dollars. You're paying out in turnover costs, which is your recruiting costs, your overtime costs, your training costs, new equipment costs. And so the dollars are expending themselves. They're just expending themselves in different line items. Most organizations that are going to take on a philosophy of under the average market, they know that inherently they are going to have high turnover, and they establish their operations in such a way that they can accommodate that turnover. I don't necessarily see that out of the city of Marshfield. We built your previous schedule on average to the market, not even necessarily above average. And I don't know that you are in a financial position to say that you are going to lead the market, but I'm hoping that what the city will be able to do is maintain that average philosophy that we secured back in 2017, 2018. So the model that I am building is going to realign you to that average. And, there will be some, when you see this in final form and you look at positions, there are going to be some positions that are going to be changing pay grades. Part of the reason is that their respective industry needs a little bit more than that 10%. And part of the reason for that is what's happening in the private sector as well. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that even though I don't have the charts up here on the private sector, there is actually, quite a bit of work that went into that and is an element of our recommendation. So with that, I'd like to stop talking and to give you and all a chance to ask some questions.
Any questions from the floor? Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing that has always driven me a little crazy about the STIP system is we hire somebody in at STIP 1 and the average is at STIP 5 or STIP 6. So if they go up one STIP per year, it takes 5 years before they're getting paid what the average in the full industry gets. And then, can there be a shorter STIP? Can there be a shorter STIP model put together that would get them to that average price quicker?
Absolutely, there can. And so if you start everyone at step 1 in theory and you get them all to step 5 in theory, that would get them 4 years to that average market rate. And we can do that. What will happen is it's going to raise that step 1 even more, and it'll be a cost factor for you, because we're going to be needing to close that gap. And any employee that might be, let's say, in steps 1 through 4 right now, they're all going to get pushed into the new step 1. And if we raise that up anymore, we're going to have to be pushing them, that much more. It might be an issue of with a phased-in implementation of that, something that the city is going to need to do, where that's a goal. And that, can we give employees a couple of incremental steps, and so that you can do this over a period of time, because I think that there might be a cost consideration to doing it right off the bat.
Yeah, the HR department basically needs some flexibility in doing that too. One last thing.
Absolutely do.
One last thing. I guess I have to ask you what the freshness date on this thing is. The reason for that is I'm hearing in other areas that the compensation plans that have been coming out, if they're over 18 months old, they're stale and they're wrong. How long do you think, has there been some change that we should refresh this thing on a certain date or a certain time limit?
Well, when you say that it's stale, you're talking about your schedule, your structure that we build for you?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about the data that I use?
Well, the data primarily, I guess, that's the truth.
Yeah, the data was collected in the third quarter, and so we're good with the data. What will have to happen is it was 2023 data, and all of those organizations are, they are looking to up their salaries again now for 2024. So there will have to be a trend factor that we build into that, but we're still within a couple of months of that data having been collected.
Thank you very much.
Did that answer your question, sir?
Alderman Stauber?
Melina, thank you very much for the presentation and the work that has gone into the research so far. I have 3 thoughts, and I would just like your opinion on them. I'll try to clarify them as I go along. But the first one kind of ties to your quote, given what's going on around me in the world. And that specifically is that Marshfield is a standalone community. And I would like to, you touched on it a little bit, but I would like to know your thoughts on how being a standalone community impacts retention and recruitment. The second comment I have is more or less just to kind of check it for accuracy, but I've heard once that rotation in positions isn't always necessarily a bad thing. In other words, if someone were to come in at a certain level and stay for 3 years and move on, that wouldn't be a bad thing. They would bring with them a new skill set, maybe a higher level of performance for the organization, but retaining that employee or a certain employee or a certain position for a long period of time is not necessarily a good goal, but in other positions it might be. So I'd like your thoughts on that. And then the final thing is, I guess maybe just an observation. I'm in the private sector, so we deal with aging workforce, dwindling labor pool, and I think it forces us to, not only council but everyone in the city to look at the services we deliver and how we deliver them. And I guess that's just a statement. I don't know if I want any thoughts on that, but sometimes I'm in manufacturing, but sometimes we think that if the labor pool is dwindling, we need to take advantage of technology and create more automated processes. I don't think that would apply in the public sector, but we're all dealing with it, the aging population, et cetera. So thank you.
Well, and I can talk actually just a touch on that, because in the public sector, it absolutely is an aging workforce, and generally speaking, the public sector is, they are in the process of losing about 1/3 of their workforce, and there are studies that are out there, and I plan on putting one in the final report that talk about the gap between the applications versus the openings in public sector, and it's to the point of crisis. And part of the crisis here is that there are not enough people that are applying for the job openings, and what is happening is the employees that are left, that are there, they're burning out, and they're saying, I've had enough, and I have to go do something different. And at what point is where is the breaking point? I actually think that there are some organizations that are at that breaking point, and others not so much. I can't really speak to where Marshfield is, but that particular topic is drawing a whole lot more attention. And I had the privilege of going down to the ICMA conference in Austin, Texas this year, and when I was walking through all of the vendor booths, I will say that probably 8 out of 10 of them was on technologies and trying to make the work experience a little bit different and a little bit more efficient. And when you don't have the human capital, you have to make a decision. Am I not going to provide the service, or are we going to provide the service a little bit differently? And I think that a lot of communities are struggling with that very issue right now, because it's not something that can happen very quickly or overnight. And but I do think that is probably where a lot of organizations are heading to in the future. In terms of rotation of position, I do not disagree with you either that there is a point where you have good turnover or we consider it positive turnover, and we hold that number at about 10% a year simply because there is always a positive element of that because you do bring in fresh and new ideas. What we do worry about, though, is the premature turnover. And unfortunately, I don't actually have the turnover data. I do believe that Sarah gave it to me, but I don't have it up here available at my fingertips because we do like to take a look at what that looks like for the organization. If you're over 10%, is that a bad thing? It just really depends on the totality of the situation and the department. And simply because if they're all leaving at the same time, that can be impactful to your operations. And so, yes, positive turnover can be positive. You just don't want it to impact your operations. And if it can be something that's a little bit more planned for your departments, I think that that's going to be a little bit more helpful for them. In terms of you being a standalone, I remember back in 2017 when I first met Marshfield, and you were described as the island by itself because you really are, you are there by yourself. And so for that reason, you either have to come from within, where you're growing and developing those from within, and then from that make sure that they are properly trained and they have education opportunities and they want to promote up and for you to be able to help them build their skills and their talents. Otherwise, what happens is that you have to go a little bit further out. And I will say, I'm working with someone over in the city of Wausau and or the Wausau area anyway, and they said, well, we want Marshfield to be a comp. And so, you're not too far away because people are interested in what is going on in Marshfield. You need to be able to be competitive enough to draw those individuals in, whether, in most cases, it's probably going to be driving. And, what are you going to be able to bring to the table that results in a person wanting to come work for you? Is it always about the money? No, it's not always about the money, but you do have to have a competitive market wage in order to actually be at the table, and then hope that perhaps some of the other non-tangibles that an organization can offer will be enough to make a person want to be there. A lot of times what I find is that the islands that are by themselves, much like Marshfield, and actually you're very similar to what's happening in the state of Kansas, because that's how a lot of communities in Kansas are. They do need to elevate their wages because they need to be attractive to the individuals to bring them in if you have saturated your human capital in-house. I don't know if you've saturated your human capital within the city or not. And so you can look at it both ways. How do you grow from within and be strategic about that versus we're going to go above market to try to draw people in from outside.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you again for your presentation, Milena, and Sarah for introducing her and bringing her into the meeting. And there is no action on this, so we'll move on unless you have any extra comments. We'll move on to item number N. Second reading of ordinance number 1504, rezoning parcel 33-06798 from CUM, community mixed use, to MR12, multifamily residential, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. As you said, this is the second reading. The first reading was earlier this month. This is a proposal to rezone, as you said, a property. It's located on the east side of Veterans Parkway, sort of between Fleet Farm and the Merriwood Building, or between Upham and McMillan Street, if you will. It's 5.6 acres. Currently, the CMU allows for a certain level of housing. It does allow townhouses, but does not allow duplexes. So there are limits, but housing is allowed to some degree now. The new designation of MR12 would allow duplexes and townhouses by right in the district, and that is what the applicant ultimately is looking to build in this area. And remember that this is in newly created TIF District 14, a mixed use which allows residential in addition to other types of uses. So if you look at the land uses around there, on the north, there's single family residential, SR4. On the east, over toward Adams, there's single family and two family. And then to the south is Fleet Farm, and that's community mixed use. And to the west is also community mixed use. So it does appear to fit generally with uses that exist today. And as I said, they all allow some level of housing at this point. Their public hearing was held before the Plan Commission last month. There were a few issues raised: parking, traffic, noise, and the concern by the adjacent business about possibly the impact of noise on them, since people might be complaining about the noise from their business. It's instructive again to realize that residential has always been allowed in this area. It's just now being refined potentially to allow different levels of residential construction. So this is second reading, and staff will be recommending approval to ordinance 1504 to rezone this property from CMU to MR12.
I have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Weigel. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passes. Item O, first reading of ordinance number 1506, rezoning property located at 1710 East 29th Street, parcel 33-03549-1 from LI Light Industrial or GI General Industrial, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. This is sort of a housekeeping type of item in the sense that even though it was brought to us by a private party, Mr. Hofstreiter, that it does appear to be a situation where there could be some cleanup that would make it more of a comprehensive or cohesive, if you will, zoning in that area. They are looking, as you said, to rezone this parcel from light industrial to general industrial. If you look at the area around them, it's mainly general industrial. The only parts that aren't really are the areas to the south and west that are not part of the city of Marshfield. So it would be congruent with the zoning in the surrounding area. The reason for wanting to do this is to allow some flexibility to the types of things that they can do, including the hard surface driveway and parking requirements. And but also it would lead to something that would mean they'd be compliant with the current use in the heavy industrial district, the general industrial. So it would actually be rezoning to a designation that complies with, if you will, or is congruent with the current use of the property. Public hearings held by the Plan Commission on November 21st, last Tuesday, and the commission recommended approval without reservation. So staff recommends, well, at this point, it's just a first reading. Take any questions on this item.
Seeing no questions, it'll be read again for the second reading on December 12th meeting. Thank you, Steve. Receive staff report, discuss possible acceptance of donation for property at 2504 South Central Avenue, Buffalo Building, for relocation of the police station. Introduced by Steve Barg, Administrator, presented by multiple staff members.
I'll start to describe why the time-sensitive nature of this has come to light. Other staff members may wish to comment. I think the police chief wants to make some remarks. But we learned that we've always known that the property owner wants to know by the end of the year whether or not we're going to accept this donation. If not, the property owner wants to move on and look at other alternatives for use of the property, possible sale to private parties or whatever. Well, the Public Works Director, the Park and Recreation Director, who's been communicating with this individual, brought to us, earlier this month that he really wants to know by around the first of the month of December to be able to allow time for walking through the process of the transition of the property before year end for tax purposes. So that individual is really looking for a decision by us really sooner rather than later, and we really should make it now. That may sound like a gun to your head kind of thing, but I think one of the other key things we did ask through Park and Recreation Director was if we don't use it for a police building or for renovation for police purposes, is that going to void what the intent of the donor is? And the answer is no. The donor is perfectly fine with us using it for any other municipal purpose or doing whatever else we want to do with the property if we take it from that individual. They'll take the tax write-off and put it in our hands. So with that in mind, I think a pretty good case can be made for the fact that we would accept this donation of property, knowing that the spectrum of opportunity is there after that, no matter whether or not we actually pursue construction of the police renovation. And that would allow time into 2024 for us to further evaluate and make a decision on whether or not to move forward with the station. It does forego the fact that there are property taxes being paid on that parcel today. We get it. And once we take it off, I think we told you what that was earlier. but there doesn't seem to be a lot of downside. Jody, if anybody else who from staff level who's been involved in this wants to make a comments or a recommendation, go for it. But that would be my initial thoughts.
Joey, would you like to step up?
Well, a couple of council meetings ago, Ms. Tompkins asked to do a presentation about what it means if we stay in our building. I don't know if that's the direction that the council wants to go, or Alderman Wagner had some comments and maybe you wanted to address those first. Okay. It's getting a little bit late in the evening. I'm sure nobody wants to be killed by PowerPoint, so I'll try to make this brief and light, at least as possible. So, as I said, what the direction I wanted to go is just to show what happens if what it means if we stay in the building. And a couple weeks back, a handful of alder people came and did some tours at our city buildings, and I was able to highlight some of these issues. And so the focus of this presentation is really just to inform the people who couldn't make it to the tours so that you know where we're at. How do we go forwarding? Right arrow. And your computer's broke. Okay. I got fancy with this, so if you just want to hit it 3 times, it'll be fine. The area of concerns that we have here really fall into 3 categories. There's safety, security, maintenance, and then efficiency and space issues. And we'll dive into these just a little bit further as we move on. So, safety and security meant a lot of different things back in the early 80s when the building was constructed, or at least that we moved in, I believe it was 1982. This is a list of examples of where our building securities are falling short in today's standards. And I'll break these down a little bit further as we move along. In our lobby, this is the picture of our lobby area. The one on the left is standing in the lobby, and then in the right would be where our front end staff is currently does their work. This is our record staff. In the 80s, police department wanted to be safe havens for citizens, and we still want to be that today. We want to have an area where people can go when they're in trouble. The unfortunate thing is that as time has progressed, we also need to have some safety and security and control who comes into our area. The way that our current lobby is set up, there's not a lot of safety measures for our employees who are working in the front end staff. We should have partitions to separate our staff from people who come in. We have large holes in the window to communicate with people. The level of security of the glass and the doors are not to the standards in which we should have today. Building on the safety trends a little bit more, we're in close proximity to the railroad tracks. We're approximately 120 feet from the tracks, give or take, which puts us in the danger zone with pretty much any type of crash that would happen at the railroad tracks. Now, we've spoken several times, especially due to the location where the new police department could be, or potential police department could be, that a lot of our staff shouldn't be in the station very much. We should be responding and from the city and patrolling in the city. One of the issues that we would have, though, with any type of catastrophe is if we do have a train derailment or any types of issues, this would isolate us from getting to some of our equipment, our records, all of our other things in which we need to continue to do business. And could affect if there is some sort of catastrophe, we still are responsible for the safety in the city, and we need to get to that equipment to address other issues that may be happening around this catastrophe. Also with the railroad tracks, and there'll be a few pictures of this, but you can see in the picture on the right, sort of, it didn't turn out as good as I wanted to, but what's happening here is that there's a train coming through. This is at Chestnut and First Street, or Chestnut and Veterans Avenue. And if there's a longer train, those cars will back up pretty significantly, which is happening here. This is that same incident. You can see there's actually happened to be a squad car that wanted to pull in at this time, thank God. But the same problem happens if we want to leave the vicinity. So if you want to leave the west lot, if you would. In this case, that vehicle was able to back up to allow space for us to come in. But we've all lived in this town for a while, and we know that sometimes people get impatient and they start trying to bunch up when it comes to the train. And so there's not room to move, which causes our officers to do some creative driving. Okay. Also building on the safety issues, although aesthetically pleasing, I mean, our building is actually kind of a cool looking building, but it does create a lot of safety issues with the blind corners that we have. On the left, I'm standing in the hallway on the south exit, so leading into our parking area. The handsome devil in the right picture is Assistant Chief Esser. So he was standing in that position when I took the picture. You can't see who's hanging around the corner, and there isn't any security to really protect anyone from coming into that area. The same picture, Assistant Chief Esser is still standing there behind the red truck. You can see where we don't have a lot of safety measures here either to protect us from the community. Or not from the community, but from people who may want to hurt us. The current trends really focus on separating our employees and our citizen accesses. That protects us in a lot of many ways as far as safety and also just general, the ability for people to generally show up in our by personal vehicles and other things like that. There wasn't a lot of, at least I'm told there wasn't a lot of computer things back in the early 80s. When the building was built, that was 5. So I'm taking everybody's word at that. But the picture on the left is where we house our servers and phones and all of that sort of stuff. And as you see it is the way that it has to sit. We can't secure that area because if we shut the door, that room isn't able to ventilate the heat to keep the servers cool. So we don't have really a way that we can make that safe for the electrical equipment. I'm really not sure what the electrical equipment is in the picture on the right. It looked important. But it's also in an area in which we have to house other things because we're running out of space to put things. So, our vehicles, the garages which were built, I can only imagine that they were built to fit the lot. And there wasn't the amount of patrol cars, there wasn't the amount of officers that were working back in the 80s. And our department has grown along with our cities. I mean, think about how City of Marshfield was back in the early 80s. We've grown quite a bit since then. We don't really have an ability to secure our vehicles. This is our west parking lot. We have access, the public has access to the sidewalk behind it. We still have access to, we're still have weather issues where either heat or cold can have cause issues with the electronic equipment in our vehicles, and they have been vandalized from time to time. So securing our vehicles and protecting the amount of investments that we've made with the vehicles is probably a pretty good option. We have 2 off-site buildings. The off-site, the theory should be that our off-site building should be as protected as our main building. We do house items in both of these buildings that need to be protected. And so barriers should be built around these in order to bring them up to best practices today. Our maintenance for our current building, I believe we've kept up pretty well with the maintenance plans. The building has been taken care of. We've got a few issues that I recognize that we need to address, those being the ones listed here. Okay. We did budget $60,000 in the CIP for replacement of the roof, which was actually supposed to be happening this year. We did move that money to fund the feasibility study for the site. We did spring a couple of leaks this year, and we were able to get them fixed. There was a few rainfalls and actually some snow since then, and there hasn't been any more issues. So I think we've at least addressed the issue for now. But the signs are all there that this is going to need to be addressed in the near future. $60,000 is what it was appraised back then. I think that has probably gone up quite a bit, but I don't have a cost for that. Okay. We've had digital heat controls in our CIP prior to me being promoted. They were kind of pushed off and just left unfunded in CIP because, and I believe that happened right around the time that the strategic plan for a new police department entered into the city's horizon. That's kind of stayed till now that stayed on the horizon, and there hasn't really been any movement. If we stay, we're going to probably have to upgrade to digital controls so we can be more efficient and have the best heat, I guess. I don't really know how they work. I have to talk with Jeff Malter more about that. Go ahead and move forward. Our Baltus building. This is a building that, although it's not real pretty is something that fits our needs pretty well. We've got some equipment in there that doesn't fit in other areas that we need to house. And the ARV and the mobile command posts and ordnance vehicles are all pretty large vehicles, and it's very difficult even to bring them onto the west lot outside of the garage area, and impossible to do any type of maintenance or cleaning with them. So the Baltus building is very important to us. That building is starting to deteriorate. It's starting to show its age. There's some leaks in the roof. The south end of that building is pretty scary, but it does fit our needs for now. But it's obvious that there's going to need to either be some money or an alternative solution in the near future. The last issue, the last title, I guess, it would be that we have some efficiency and space issues, and this is the area that we've probably realized most often in our day-to-day working in this building. We've just simply outgrown it. The building is over 40 years old, and it's just time that we've filled up almost all the space that's available in this building. So this is a picture of our evidence storage. Evidence storage has probably been our biggest hurdle, in the rules and the length of the time that we have to keep evidence has changed, and I've talked about this several times. The trend is that I can only see this moving forward. This is all in one room. I just kind of took pictures by turning around. All of these bags contain evidence, and this is what we have. It's all we have at this time. It used to be a break room when we had dispatched in our basement. So the room is about the size of, I would say, a smaller classroom, just to put it in perspective. But this is just another angle of the same room. And you can see that it's starting to get filled from floor to ceiling, and that trend isn't going to stop. This is some more evidence storage. This is an exterior building that we have. We do house any type of like found property. We do have some evidence in here. We also have some equipment for the PD. The image on the right has some things that we've moved out of the PD or repurposed for the PD in there. So we kind of have a hodgepodge going on in here, and it's starting to get filled up as well. I believe there's another picture getting on this one. This is just turning around again, filling up that space. This is a photograph of one of our report rooms. This was actually pretty difficult to take to get them all in, but you can kind of make it out. We've got a couple of desks in here. Now, what we do with this room is this is a room that we use to take complaints from citizens who come in, and also for our officers to complete reports. And most of the time, it's not a real big deal. We can have a couple officers working on reports, but if one officer is working on reports and somebody else comes in to file a complaint, the officer likely will have to quit doing the report so that there can be some privacy in how that complaint is filed. So it gets to be where there's some efficiency issues and things like that are caused just by outgrowing our space. All of the offices that we have for officers are doubled up. The only office that's open to a single officer is our shift command officer, our shift command office. And we do that because if we have to deal with any personnel issues or anything like that, we want to have a privacy to handle those issues. Some more pictures of just general clutter. We're running on a space to put stuff. This is the picture on the right is one of our stairways, and we've put stuff in there that we couldn't find other places to house. On the left is where we have our custodian offices. I don't know which way I'm facing. The right is where our custodians are, and the left is the stairway. Bear with me, I'm an Everest graduate. This is just a general idea that we're filling up the areas that probably shouldn't be filled up. Another one. More general storage. We have the one on the left is a picture that we took before where we had some electronic equipment. We also keep a lot of training equipment there. On the right is where our detective offices are, and that's all of our detective equipment. It's becoming more and more technical, which means we have more and more equipment, and it takes up space. More of the same, another stairwell where we've got file cabinets. On the right is an office that we've repurposed into storage. This is where we've got our Baltus building. I was trying to illustrate in this picture the importance to have a building. It's got a higher structure, so our ARV is a taller building, and that's something that needs to be housed. There isn't any other city facilities that have that space available that I'm aware of. So if we do lose the Baltus building, we're going to have some issues in trying to find a spot for that. ADA compliance. In 1982, I guess the buildings didn't have that ADA compliance standard. This is the picture just kind of illustrating the narrowness of our hallways. I didn't take any pictures in the bathrooms, but our bathrooms are there's not a lot of room in there. If someone had a wheelchair, there wouldn't be enough room to roll around in the bathrooms. And that's well, the lobbies are a little bit better, but I would think they would struggle there. The hallway, the doorways are all rather small, and all the ADA compliance issues would come into play if we were to try to renovate this building. We would have to meet those standards, which would take away from the space that we were trying to make by renovating. This is just a map of where our lot is, and what I'm illustrating here is that there really isn't any room to expand around without acquiring other people's property. Our building isn't designed to build upwards, which really limits our space for growth in the location that we're at right now. Looking back at the other issues, we can fix a lot of the safety issues with some money in our current building. We can fix the maintenance issues. We can probably CIP that and plan to fix those issues. But the space issues, we really don't have an ability to fix, at least not without acquiring land from other people, which causes, a big concern for us when we start looking forward in the years to come. And tonight, what we're looking at is only acquiring a free donation, not moving anything else forward. We can plan on what we can put on that lot later on, whether that's a police department and we move into another available building, or whatever we need to do to work together to figure it out. But to pass up an opportunity to have this option, I don't think we'll ever get an opportunity like this again. So I just ask that you consider this when you make your vote tonight, and I'd open up to any questions that you guys might have.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Giles, and now we will go to comments.
Let's just verify what the motion is.
Yes.
We can.
Giles may want to retract his motion, but could I tie my comments into the motion? Would that be? Well, my motion, just to be clear then, is to respectfully decline the offer of the free building and keep that property on the tax roll.
Are you okay with that as a second?
I will withdraw that.
And Alderman Wagner.
Thanks again.
We don't have a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We need a second on that motion.
If
no second, the motion will not move forward. Is that correct?
Yes.
We have no second on the motion, so the motion will not move forward. So now do we need to go again with another motion and a second? Or can we start with comments?
Move to discussion.
Okay, discussion. Alderman Wagner, I apologize.
Oh, no need. I went on the tour of the building last week, and I was really impressed. That's a beautiful building in terms of space that's available. And the chief answered all questions but one, and that was, how am I going to pay for it? And with the numbers we've got are far beyond our ability to do anything in CIP. And now, and I'll have to admit, I feel the building fever building up. You go into the place, you see, first place we saw was we saw the Public Works garage, and then we went down to the police department, and we toured that and struggled through the hallways and the whole bit. And then we went out to this building down at the south end of town, and it was remarkable. It was absolutely remarkable. And the problem is, we can't get it without a cost. Well, let's put it this way. We can't let it realize its potential without cost. And I don't know how you're going to figure out how we're going to pay for this thing. I think there can be some creative ways to do it. but it means that we're going to have to give up an awful lot in the CIP. An awful lot. This is going to have, if the $12 to $13 million that we were given as an estimate on this building, if that's true, that's about, we're doing what, $3.5 million a year on CIP now. We'd have to use every bit of that for 3 years in a row to get that thing built. And I just, the building is driving the discussion. And I'm sorry for that, because the police department deserves a new building somewhere, or a renovated building somewhere. But we have to go into it with our eyes open and know how much we're going to pay for it, how much we're willing to pay for it, and how much the taxpayers are willing to settle for it also. I love the building, hate the price. Just hate the price. So I've heard some comments around that, oh, we can do this through CIP. I'll remind you, CIP is not a funding source. It's a plan for how we spend the little bit of money we have. So I can't support an option of going for it unless somebody can come up with a way that we can build it out at our leisure. Thank you, ma'am.
Alderman Stauber?
Okay, so Chief, thanks for the presentation. I'll disagree with you on the handsome devil comment. I don't think it qualifies. The dilemma we face with anything, whether it's donated land, it's maintaining, and what do we do with it? And I'd much rather have a plan in place, and we've got the inklings of a plan of a new police department, and then seek the means to fulfill that plan. In this case, we were within $2 million of a brand new building, and I understand land is not included in that $15 million price. I don't believe it was. But I would much rather have a plan in place and then seek ways to fulfill that plan. And now I'm going to put on my micromanager hat. I looked at the pictures, and I was tempted to ask you to just kind of overlay additional buildings, additional locations, additional storage, and you clearly mentioned that you already have those in place. Security cameras for that handsome devil, protective barriers don't seem to be too expensive. I'm with you 100%. If you modify the building, you've got to update it to comply with ADA requirements. I'm not an advocate for that. I had, in my notes, maybe a second location, an office location for the detectives. And again, I'm out of my element, but, do they necessarily need to be at the police department? And if weren't, did that free up space for other more critical things at that location? I like the comment about being near the railroad tracks. That's a concern of mine. If it goes down, that, you got to clear out a 3-mile radius or whatever, and that's not optimal. So I'm with you on that. Warehouse space, do we find additional warehouse space? And then with regard to the clutter, this is no criticism on anybody, you or your predecessors, but you're doing what you have to do, and you try to find place for things that you need to store. And I don't mean to make light, but there are people that are professionals that will help organize things. And I don't expect you to do that, Chief, but maybe we've just reached a point where someone comes in and says, given all the buildings you have and all the space you have, maybe the detectives go somewhere else, and just helps with the organization. Because I just seeing in the pictures, you've got, valuable property and evidence that needs to be properly stored. So I definitely see the need there. But again, my basic premise behind accepting land or accepting a building, one, it takes it off the tax rolls. Two, we have to maintain it or work toward that donation. And I think it should be the other way around. Thank you.
Now we have a motion on the floor by Alderman O'Reilly. Would you like to make that motion, Mike? And then I will call on Alderman Werman for the second.
Sure.
Thank you.
I will take a little different view on this, and the reason that I would like to accept this gift is the building's got a lot of opportunity. It's a building that's constructed that can house many different, it's a freestanding building, basically. It's open to the inside, so it can be developed in many different ways. And we always have a need for more room. Someone's always looking for another office space. I don't know that the cost off the tax rolls and the upkeep for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, is going to be as inhibitive as looking at new structures. Regardless if it's a police station or not, there's a lot of different uses that this could be. So for that fact, I will make a motion to accept it.
Alderman Merman, will you second that motion?
Yes, I maintain my second. It's funny, it's not often that I'm on like the complete opposite side of the fence as Russ, but tonight I am. I agree with some of your comments, especially the stuff that Jody brought up about like ADA compliance. I think that causes a lot of issues with the potential of remodeling the existing building. But I'm completely on board with Mike on this one that to me, I look at it as if somebody's coming to me with a house, fixer upper or not, and just handing it to me and saying, I'm going to give this to you. I am absolutely going to take that house. And if it takes me 5 years to fix it up to be the perfect house that I absolutely wanted, why would I not take it? It could be a burden, but at the same time, it's a gift and it's something that you can absolutely turn into something amazing. And I think we saw an amazing presentation on that it has a lot of potential. We could get into next year and say, hey, we're not going to turn it into a PD building. But if you don't have the building, you don't have that opportunity to begin with. So I think it would be a mistake to not take it and do something with it.
Thank you. Alderman Reigel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to point out a couple of things. I do echo Mr. Stauber's concern about what essentially amounts to putting the cart before the horse. We've got a building and we're trying to find a use for it. However, based on that study, we're saving 1.5 to 2 million turning that building into a police station. And I get it. When we're looking at a price tag of 13 to 15 million, that's not much. But with our finances as it is, I'm hard pressed to turn down a gift that can amount to a savings of 1.5 to 2 mil. It's just hard for me to do that. Now, kind of going off of that on the comparison of how we're only about roughly 2 million off of the price tag of a new building without the land on it. That's true. However, the footprint was significantly smaller of that new building. We were about, going off the top of my head here, to about 4,600 square feet, and that new building was at about 3,500 roughly. That does kind of, once again, limit. You're not comparing apples to oranges, but you do, yeah, sure, you're 2 million off, but you're getting a building that is much more in tune with what the police department need. And I do, and shame on me for not asking this earlier, but I think Mr. Stauber brought this up too. You know, I don't know what the maintenance is for the building. I should have asked that earlier. So, I mean, I think that is kind of a question mark out there. However, as far as removing this from the tax roll, the amount of money that we're getting in taxes from this building, and you compare that to the anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million, we could sit on this building for quite some time with it, you know, bookmarked as a police station before we even start suffering a loss. So we could potentially sit on it for 5 years, still come out ahead on this thing. So I just want to kind of bring those points out just in case they're overlooked. Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 2 questions. One is for finance. So if we bond through the CDA to renovate the building, can you explain how that changes our credit rate or not changes our credit rating with Moody's?
Well, the debt would be in the name of the CDA, so it doesn't impact the rating of that particular debt. Where we run into an issue is we would still have to come up with money to repay the CDA. So we do have one loan that the CDA has bonded for us, but it's being paid with tax increment in a tax in one of our TIDs. So it has a revenue source that does not impact our available debt limit, or it's not related to our Moody's rating because it has its own source. But as soon as we would bond for something that would still ultimately be paid with by city debt, then you run into that same circumstance.
And so if we were repaying with the tax increment, does that, let's just say the CDA bonds for 15 million, and we're going to pay them over a course of how many years? Would it be 30 years? Whatever we decide.
Right.
Okay. So whatever the standard is, how much would this, can you just give a rough estimate of how heavy would this be on an average citizen, on a tax load for them in a year?
So if I can recall the numbers that were presented. So if we were to borrow $15 million and pay for it over our 20 years, that ends up costing about $22 million. So if we're just on path to do our CIP, our debt levy is right around $5 million. If we add in that building now, in let's say 2025, then our debt levy, based on the amount and how we can structure our payments, we're approaching $6 million plus. If we delayed that, accepted the donation and decided to borrow in 2029, where we haven't approved any CIP, then it sort of levels out again, but you are borrowing all of that at one time, so your debt levy is still approaching that $6 million. So what we did not ask our financial advisor to model is what happens if we try to mold some sort of reduced CIP and do the building and how we might structure that. But when you just look at that amount of debt at one time, the amount we have to levy based on where there's room in our future schedule, there isn't a lot of flexibility. If there's a model that somebody would like to recommend that we go back to our financial advisor for some planning, some different ways, we kind of looked at it as, maintain our status quo, bump it now or bump it later. We didn't try to come up with a scenario where we would combine certain CIP items with a new building. So if that's something that council would be interested in, we can certainly go back.
Do we typically take all the money out in 1 year? Do we typically?
We would have to match the build out, just because we don't have a reserve. So if we're incurring expenditures, we would need to have the debt available to pay those.
Okay. And so right now we have a debt levy that is $5 million-ish. And do we have a limit, like a ceiling for what our debt levy can be?
No.
Oh.
You have a limit on what you can borrow. So the statute limits your borrowing to 5% of your equalized value. And then we have a city policy that further limits to 65% of that. But all general obligation debt payments that don't have a funding source need to be levied.
Okay. And then my next question would be to Steve. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Steve, have you heard from other department heads that if this building wasn't used by the police, what have other people expressed to you that they need space, they would want to use this building?
I have not, but I that's because I think the focus is right now on whether or not this would be appropriate for the police relocation. I think it's very possible that there might be other departments that could have a purpose for it. And I apologize if I sounded flippant the way I started this conversation. And by the way, great presentation by Jody. He did a wonderful job. But my thought is, and I'm extrapolating beyond your question, so give me some grace on that, but that if we, for some reason, decided against the police relocation based on cost or other reasons, and if we didn't have a municipal purpose for another department, we would also have possibilities of even economic development. I've been kind of doing fill-in work since we've had no economic development staff for a while. I get calls periodically. I've actually met with people looking for 20 or 25,000 square feet of commercial space. So, I mean, that would be a possibility as well. I think Councilmember O'Reilly nailed it in my mind and echoed by Councilmembers Weigel and Werman in terms of why I think we should accept this without knowing whether or not the police station is going to get to the finish line. Because I think there's multiple other purposes. And given what we're getting as a donation, I think it'd be a good deal for us.
Alderman Spiros?
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions about the maintenance of it. I know that this has been brought up a couple of times. So, I did the tour and I seen the need definitely at the police department, definitely at the street department. And it's kind of like a Christmas wish list. You want it all, but you have to have a wallet to be able to pay for it. We don't. We just don't. This is a free gift, sort of. It does come off the tax roll, so it's not completely free. We do have to pay for the maintenance of a building. You can't just purchase it and let it sit there. So I'd be curious as to what the maintenance would be yearly, just to leave it there. Whose budget would that be coming out of? And whose responsibility is the maintenance? Is that going on to the police department? Because who do they have working for them that could do maintenance? Is that coming out of the street department's budget and out of their staffing to go take care of it? So I'm just looking for the answers to those questions. Taking the gift, it's not truly 100% free. What cost is there to maintaining it on a yearly basis? Whose budget is going to be impacted by that cost? And whose staffing is going to be impacted by the work that it will take to maintain that building?
The police chief in his proposed 2024 budget included, I think, roughly $30,000. And I assume that was for the basics of what needs to be done. So clearly, and I pulled that out because at the time that we were talking about that, I mean, it seemed pretty premature for me to have money in the budget for something that might never come to pass. So obviously we'd have to do at least the base level of care for the building, even if we're not occupying it. And that cost would have to be accounted for. So I'll start there and agree with you.
So just as a quick follow-up, with the condition of the building as is, I thought I remembered something about it needing a new roof. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I'm trying to go back to the presentation that they did when they presented, what they could put there. And I'm curious as to the HVAC system, what condition that's in, and what the life expectancy of the roof, the HVAC, the most expensive things to replace. What are the condition of those, and what is the life expectancy of the existing roof HVAC system?
There's a reason I'm a police officer not working in construction. So I'm just recalling the ADCI presentation where if an office wanted to move in there, they could. The HVAC system is old, it's original. It could fail at any time. I've been told that the heat isn't distributed throughout the building as equally as more modern, and because it was built to be 3 separate places. So, but to get us through, I think that it's okay. The roof was a membrane that needs to be replaced, and so what they were talking about is if we repurpose that building, we would have to rerun all the HVAC. We'd have to do a new roof. But to get us through until we figure out what we want to do for the building, I think it's as good as any. Could there be a problem? Of course. So I think it was 1996 is when the building was built on in there.
And Tom, do you have any insight to cost or anything like that?
I'm sorry, I do not, because of the size of the building and stuff. I am not aware what it would cost to do that type of a structure. It's a membrane roof with a ballast system on it. The building is 27 years old, like Jody had mentioned, and overall, it's functioning. Everything's functioning right now. I had Jeff take a look at it. He has talked to a previous heating and cooling person that worked on that facility. So that if we do take the building over, he understands that he may end up doing some of the repairs or maintenance to that those structures, because he works for the other buildings in the city too. He does work at the street department. He does work at the police department right now on some of their facilities like that. So.
Just one last question. I don't even know if this is an appropriate question, but in 5 years, if we look back and we say, this just isn't in the foreseeable future, are we allowed to sell that building? There's nothing that the gifter has said as far as a restriction on that?
That's my understanding. Now, I've not seen a document that says that, but my understanding from what I was told by the Park and Recreation Director, who's been the person communicating most directly with this individual, is that there be no strings attached at all, which means another municipal purpose, another type of use for economic development, or ultimately just selling the building to someone else. And I think, to go to the concern about us having this for a long period of time, and I think, one of your peers may have said it at one point, I'm forgetting which one, but there may be a point where we say, okay, we don't want to hold it indefinitely. That's not a good program for us. We would do something. We're not going to be sitting here for 15 years looking at an empty building out there. And what that timeline would be, we can decide. But it's not my intent in making the recommendation of accepting this that we just put it on the shelf and say, oh, great, we'll be analyzing a lot of opportunities in the next 5 years. We want to look at it seriously for the police station, and we want to decide whether or not we're going to do it. But I think we want right behind it that we want to find another municipal or other use for that building. And but I just feel, given all that it's a good opportunity for us.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. As far as the roof goes, I remember them talking about it, and it would need a new roof, but that does not necessarily mean that it needs a new roof now. They're talking about an entire rebuild of a building. Yeah, they did mention the HVAC was old, but it is still functional. So the other part, I guess I'd like to talk about the maintenance of that building. You have paint, you have heat. You wouldn't necessarily have to have really cooling if it wasn't inhabited. You have parking lot, whether that would be worth saving or not would have to be determined. But the good part is the building is a block building, which you couldn't ask for a better type of system that had to sit for a little while. And there's stucco on the front of it, which is durable. I think as far as a building, you heat the thing to 40 degrees during the winter so you don't have structural issues. Depending on how long we do it, what that cost would be, I wouldn't know how to determine that. But everything to me makes sense to do it. And even if we moved someone there, the thing is set up now for 3 businesses. Yeah. You could section that off, and maybe we use it for 5 years, 10 years that way, and then turn it in. It just gives us so many options. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Of course, I don't like it coming off the tax roll, but when you look at the cost of these moving departments or putting up new buildings, I just can't rationalize not doing it for now.
Any other comments, questions? Otherwise, please vote. Motion passes to accept the building 8-1. Thank you. Appoint one alderperson to the Mill Creek Business Covenant Committee, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, earlier this year, we talked about updating the Mill Creek Business Park covenants. Josh Miller from Cedar Corporation, who is our economic development consultant, had made a presentation. We're working through the process right now. I think I mentioned this before, that Josh and former employee Dan Kinect had worked on a lot of things that they think need to be updated from when this was first adopted a couple decades ago regarding certain standards, whether it be parking, landscaping, storm sewer requirements, or whatever. So, but we have a committee. They haven't met for quite a while. Whenever a park, somebody wants to move into the park, or some existing park tenant wants to do some improvement, if it doesn't comply with the covenants, they need to ask for a variance. It's an internal variance. We're not talking about city code variance. We're talking about the restrictive covenants. Let's say they wanted to do something in a way with, again, parking or landscaping that wouldn't normally be acceptable. We get this group together, they review it, and they make a determination whether or not we're going to allow that to occur in the park. We're going to give a variance of sorts to allow that type of project to happen. So we need to have a 5-member committee. That's what it's always been. And here's the makeup of the committee: the mayor, the public works director, the Mackey director, a member of the council, and a member of the plan commission. And so we'd be looking to fill the council member position on that body. I will say this: they don't meet very often, so it's not a big time commitment. They might only meet, you know, I know you probably heard me say that before and wonder if I'm telling the truth, right? They haven't met for like 3 or 4 years now, so you can take that, you know, for at least some credence. But when they do meet, they tend to meet during the day, maybe first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon, but they generally haven't met at night in the past. So I guess somebody who might be having some availability, at least some daytime availability would be good. But I'd be looking for the body to appoint one person to be the council's representative on the Mill Creek Business Park Covenant Committee.
Alderman Stauber, your motion is to?
Move to recommend that Alderman Spiros be that person.
And is that acceptable, Natasha Tompkins, as your second? Pardon me? No, put it microphone so we can hear everybody. Thank you.
Yes.
And Alderman Stauber?
I would just like to say that I was on the Industrial Park Authority back in the day when we had a pretty robust team, and we're very proud of the covenants that were developed. And two things. I don't think we should sacrifice the covenants in order to think that the covenants are preventing anyone from moving into the park. And I also think that our future assistant administrator, community development person might also be a valuable asset for this conversation. So that's all I have. Thank you.
That's a good point. And don't take my comments wrong when I talk about variances and changes to the covenants. It's not necessarily about relaxing them. I mean, if you think back to what standards were 20 or 25 years ago, they change over time. They do. I mean, what might have been considered good practices or that type of thing back in 2000 may not necessarily fit the way development occurs now. But I get your point. We don't want to just like bend to allow people to do anything out there. I will say one more thing too. I would like to get this committee involved in the review of the covenants as well. That's a big thing that they should be part of. And so you'd be coming in at a good time.
And Alderman Spiros, do you accept that? Sure. Now, do we have to ask any other nominations?
I don't think so.
Okay, then please vote. Congratulations, Alderman Spiros. 9 ayes, or ayes, or oohs. We'll take any one of them 3. Thank you. And thank you for accepting, Rebecca. Our suggested items for future agendas. Seeing none, we will move into adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statutes, Chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Request for waiver related to possible development located within TIF District 5. We have a motion by Alderman Werman and second by Alderman Weigel.
Mr. Wagner, did you want to amend that motion?
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, shall we vote to move into closed session? Excuse my French. Ms. Tompkins? We are in closed session. Thank you.